tyrant is gone, but another tyrant remains. So, but the day that the Cuban people have been waiting for, and the Cuban exile community have been waiting for, also has arrived. A tyrant is dead. A new beginning can dawn on what is really the last remaining communist bastion of our hemisphere. But the message is now clear to those who think that they will continue to misrule Cuba through oppression and through fear. Enough is enough. Basta ya. The Cuban people have been shortchanged for too long to continue down this horrid path. And I know that President Obama has made a lot of concessions to Raul Castro, but the President-elect Trump has said very clearly time and again that he will roll back those concessions. I hope that Raul Castro understands what's ahead for him. He doesn't have Fidel's evil charisma, and now he has a new president-elect who will roll back concessions. So Castro's successors can't hide, and they shouldn't be allowed to hide beneath these cosmetic changes. And no regime, no matter who leads it, whether it's Fidel or Raul, no matter what their first or last name, but they will only have a shred of legitimacy if they've been chosen by the people of Cuba in free and fair elections. Fidel was not. He was president of nothing. Raul was not a president, is not a president either. So the Fidel apologists around the world can help to restore freedom and human rights for Cuba by joining in our call for the new government to free the hundreds of freedom fighters and pro-democracy activists who are still in those gulags. And only when those prisons are closed, only when elections are held, only when political prisoners are freed, only when liberty is restored, can the U.S. lawfully end its embargo against the communist regime in Havana. So the time to act is now. Many changes.
Ileana, it's Michael Putney. Good morning.
Hey, Michael.
How are you?
Good to hear from you.
Ileana, I think that there will be some optimists who are going to say Raul finally has the albatross that had been around his neck for really all his life, but especially the last 8 years. It's gone. He can do what he wants, which is to create a sort of a closed political and slightly open economic system. Is that optimistic? Is that just realistic at all?
Well, I think that's optimistic because I don't think that's based in reality. What we've seen is that, yes, the specter of Fidel has been looming around him and over him for all these years, but look at all the changes that he's made in Cuba. Practically nothing. All that we've gotten is a massive exodus of Cubans coming to the United States, more repression, more arrests, and he thought, well, you know, with President Obama, I'm doing all right, but now we've got President-elect Trump, and he's got a lot to be worried about because he's only been able to stay in power through oppression and fear. Let's see what the reaction of the Cuban people will be. It's very hard to have spontaneous demonstrations in Cuba, obviously, because just even the peaceful ladies in white who march peacefully to church every Sunday, they get beaten up. So you're not going to see, you see spontaneous demonstrations in a free country like the United States here in Miami, but you don't see that in Cuba because it's not allowed. It's only if it's sanctioned by the regime. So there's just two different models of government operating. I don't think that Raul has been shackled by Fidel looming around him. He still has the same mentality of that communist Marxist regime and trying to make that work in Cuba, and it's been a dismal failure. People still continue to leave the island in record numbers, and oppression still continues to drive the day. So one dictator is gone, but as long as there's still another one in place, you won't really see that new beginning take place. But once Fidel's gone, now that has happened. Now we've got a new president. That's going to happen. Maybe the changes will begin once again.
Well, isn't that a real question right now? Here we have a new Donald Trump administration. He has said on the campaign trail that he wants to roll back the Obama initiative, the opening to Cuba, although some of that toothpaste is out of the tube and it's going to be hard to get it back in. commercially. But how do you think the forming, the nascent Trump administration is going to deal with this? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, I think that that Donald Trump is going to see an opportunity for him to implement the changes that he would like to see implemented, and that is all of those concessions. He says, I'm not going to honor them. I'm going to do away with them. And as we know, President Obama did so through executive order, and many of us believe he did so not only through executive order without counting on Congress, but he did so by violating the law, because many of the actions that the president took don't go to the heart of what is the Helms-Burton law, which dictates U.S.-Cuba policy, which sets conditions for lifting of sanctions. And the president has lifted those sanctions without those conditions being met. There are no political parties in operation in Cuba. There's no freedom of expression. There's no freedom for political prisoners. So I think that President-elect Trump will have an opportunity to have this clean slate and tell Raul Castro, okay, Fidel's no longer there. You're the guy in charge, but I'm rolling back these concessions. You have to meet your end of the bargain before we do this any more changes and any more negotiations. I'm going to hold him to his word. I believe that he will do it, and many of us in Congress will be reminding him frequently of what he said, so that he can comply with what he told our community.
We are speaking with Miami Congresswoman Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. And Ileana, if I may, I knew and admired your parents so well. They were just lovely people who had been forced to flee the island in the early 1960s. You lived with the loss, the sense of exile, build a new life, as your parents certainly did. Your lovely mother, Amanda, but they all suffered. You suffered losses in this process. So on the day that the man who was your and their chief oppressor dies, do you feel some sense of relief or vindication? What do you feel?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought up my father, because like so many in our community, I came over to the United States when I was only 8 years old. But my father and my mother, they maintained that desire so strong in their hearts, and they pass it off to this new generation, and I'm passing it off to another generation, that freedom and democracy, those are aspects of our human existence that cannot be taken away by an evil dictatorship. And when I heard the news a few hours ago, I thought of my father, and I thought of all those generations that have come and gone, thinking and dreaming and working toward a free Cuba, and that they were not able to see it realized. Well, we have a new opportunity now. I don't know, people are seeing images and they're thinking, oh my gosh, this community is celebrating death. That's not true. What we're celebrating is the opportunity of a new beginning, the hope of a new dawn for the people of Cuba and for the people of the United States as well, to have that kind of relationship that's based on mutual trust and not, oh, I want a legacy build, which is what I think President Obama did, and just build on that. So I think about my father, and I think of generations like his that have now, just like Fidel, have passed on, and what changes they have seen and what changes they would have liked to have seen in a free Cuba. So I think that President-elect Trump will make it clear to dictator Raul Castro, because he is not president. I know they always refer to him as president, just like Fidel was referred to as president. They have not won any election in a free and fair manner. There are no political parties in Cuba. And I want people who are hearing this broadcast to really continue to think that way, that they're not presidents. They were evil dictators who took over their country in an illegal way, and they should not have received the legitimacy that many governments have bestowed on them. But, we have a good Cuban-American singer here in our community, as you know, Michael, Willie Chirino, and he's got a song, That Day is Coming, Ya Viene Llegando, and that day is coming for the Cuban people. I believe it in my heart.
Yeah, I've heard Willie sing that many times, and I believe it too. Congressman, finally, I would just like to say that I would hope that when President-elect Trump reaches out for advice on what to do now with U.S.-Cuba policy, I hope he brings you into the mix. I don't really know there's nobody in Congress who matches your experience. Mario Diaz-Balart comes close, a Miami congressman, but I would like to know if you are invited to come in and give him your perspective on this.
Well, I would be honored to do so. We're very proud that Mario does have that close connection to President-elect Trump. So we have other people in our community as well who have been part of the Donald Trump campaign. I was not with him, but even though I didn't vote for him, he's my president, just like President Obama. I didn't vote for him, and he was my president and is my president as well. So we have a lot of good people who are close to the Trump campaign. They're close to the Trump transition team. We have Mauricio Claver-Caron of Capitol Hill Cubans, a lobbying group. So we have a lot of good people who will have the president-elect's ear, and I would be proud to give him whatever advice I would have. But I know that he'll do the right thing, and he said it very clearly in our community. He's going to roll back those concessions, and I think that he's a man of his word. I believe that he will do so.
Congresswoman Ros-Lehtinen and Todd Tongen here, and I just wanted to point out that so far President-elect Trump has not tweeted anything. He is known for being very active on Twitter at all hours of the night, and I think it's rather ironic that President-elect is sleeping, or at least staying not many miles from where this is occurring right now.
Well, I vote for somebody to take that Twitter account from him. I think he'll be better off without it. So that's okay. Let him just do the right thing. He doesn't have to tweet the right thing.
Congresswoman Argyatze here. I wonder if you would share your thoughts on what is happening on the island right now as we see these scenes of celebration here in the streets of Miami, in Little Havana, on Calle Ocho, outside of Versailles. Clearly, it is a different mood in Havana, in Cuba right now. What will the next several days and weeks be like there?
Well, people have to understand that the Cuban people are ruled by these dictators, Fidel before him and now Raul, and they have to be very careful about what they say. There's no spontaneity in Cuba. There's no demonstrations. You can't be expressing your thought unless you want to end up in jail. I mean, you literally end up in jail for expressing any thought that goes against a dictatorship. So we have to be very careful about how we interpret lack of reaction or any kind of reaction in Cuba. It's more similar to the North Korea model, where once the dictator tells you this is the reaction we're going to have. Well, the people, if they want to remain out of prison, that's what they do. Not that they feel it in their hearts, and not that that's really what they're thinking. But a communist dictatorship is all encompassing. It's not just a 9 to 5. It affects everyone in every day and every aspect of their lives. And so this is a controlled society by an evil dictator, and people want to be free. So one day they'll be able to express what's really in their hearts, but I don't suspect that we will see that in any video coming out of Cuba. There will be days of mourning and official days of mourning, etc., to celebrations of Fidel's life and legacy. And to many Cuban exiles like me and my family, it's a legacy of oppression and lack of freedom and just hatred for the human condition. The people have lacked everything in Cuba. From basic food stuff and medical care to freedom and justice. So you can't oppress the people forever, and that day will come for the Cuban people to end their oppression and to be able to celebrate as we can here in the United States by not celebrating death, but celebrating a new beginning.